Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back for another quick Unreal tutorial. Today I'm going to talk about the built-in save system that we have in Blueprints with Unreal. I think it's a very convenient system. I think it's very easy to use and I believe it's pretty easy to understand. It does have some limitations when you start to deal with large amounts of information or with I guess when you add too much complexity to it, there can be better ways. There can be alternatives to using it. But I think for a majority of things, the built-in save system in Unreal is very good. So what we want to do is I'm going to, let's see, what order should we do this? I guess let's create the save system first. So what we want to do to create a save file, or not a save file, but to create the foundation or the framework of a save file, what we need to do is we need to add a new blueprint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click in our open space and I'm going to add a new blueprint class. And inside of this, under all classes, what I want to do is I want to search for save. And you can see we have a save game object. And if we create a new save game object, I'm going to name this, let's just name this our tutorial save. And if we open up this blueprint, you can see it looks like a normal actor, a normal blueprint that we may have. What we really care about is in the top left here, we want to add some variables. And this is going to be the types of data, or yeah, I guess that's the way to look at it, is it's what are the types of data that we want to save. Maybe one thing we want to save is like our character name. And then we could make that a string, and maybe we want to save maybe our XP. We could make that an integer, like so on and so forth, like our kill count. Like this is just, we're basically naming and grouping the data that we are interested in saving inside of a save file. We don't want to punch in values here. We don't want to do any type of work really inside of our save blueprint. We're just naming what is the data that we are later going to be saving. And with this made, what we can now do is we can then use this framework to then start creating saves and loading saves. To do that, I'm going to create a new widget real quick just to house all of this. So I'm just going to name this our save widget. You don't have to do this inside of a widget. I am, just for the purposes of this tutorial. I'm just going to do some quick work. I'm going to wrap it with a size box and then a scale box. And then inside my size box, I just want to resize it. I'm just doing this for my purposes of working in this viewport. It'll just make that a bit easier. Alright, and now what I want to do is let's create two buttons. Let's make a save button and a load button. So on the left, I'm going to make a button, add some text to it. I'm going to call this save. And then I'm going to copy paste this a little bit to the side. And then I'm going to call this other one load. And then with the button, I'm going to name it save button. And then with my load button, I'm just going to name it load button. There we go. And then if I add up my on click events for these two buttons, so now what we can do is we can start saving and loading. So on the save button, what I want to do is, well, let's see, before you can actually save. So if we type save inside of Blueprints, we could save game to slot. But there's an issue with this in that we need a save game object to save. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a save game object. So normally how this would work is, say if your player makes a new game, say you're making an RPG and he goes to like start new single player game or whatever, the first thing you would want to do is you would want to create a save game object. And what is the save game object we're looking at creating? Well, it's going to be that save game object that we made up here. I named it tutorial save. And now with this save game object created, what I want to do is I would promote this to a variable, and I would just call this like my save game reference. And what we can then do with this reference that we have here, now what we have is we have access to all those variables. So we could save our character name. We could set our XP, right? And that, if you think about it, all these variables and this data is being housed inside of this specific save game object that we created here, and I stored it as a variable. So that down the road now, when we hit this button and we want to save our game, this save game object that we're looking to save, well, it's going to be that reference that I saved here, that I set here from creating the save game object. And then with that save game object reference, what we then need to do is we need to give it a slot name. For here, we'll just call it like save1. And that what this is going to do is when I click this button, it's going to create our save game object. We can make our character name Bob. We can give him like 100 XP, and then I'm going to save it to disk. In practice, when you're actually working on a game, you would want this part to be separate. You would want to create the save game object. at a different time of when you're actually saving. And you don't always want to be creating a save game object. So for our purposes, I'm just going to run this real quick, and that we're just going to hit, oops, I need to add that to our viewport. Let me do that real quick. Inside of the level blueprint on begin play, I'm just going to add that widget to our screen real quick. So I'm going to create widgets. The widget we are creating is that save game object, and I just want to add that to the viewport. There we go. And you're going to notice nothing's really going to happen here. When I hit save, nothing's going to happen. But if I were to navigate to the folder where this is housed, we would end up seeing a save file with that name that we just saved. And we could actually test this now, in that if we went back to our widget, what we can do now is off of our load button, let's load the save, or it's going to be load, what is it, load game from slot is what it's called. And what is our slot name? Well, if we're only housing one save file, we're going to standardize it and make it this one save. We'll add on to that in a little bit. And just like I did here with creating the save game object, when I load, I don't want to create a save game object. We already have one. It's on our disk. What we want to do is we just want to load it. And now with this loaded, I can just then set this as our save game reference. Actually, okay, one more step, sorry. This is just a vague save game object reference, where this created object reference is going to be a tutorial saved object reference. So before we do anything with this loaded slot, we just need to cast that to our tutorial save. And now with that casted to our tutorial save, we can then work with it. So when you load, just make sure you cast it to what the save actually is, the type of save it actually is. You don't have to do that when you create. So now when we load, we then can get this save, and then let's print to string. Let's print the name of our character. So with this reference, we can now get our character name, and with that we can just plug that into our print. And now when I hit that load button, we're going to load the save that we made a minute ago, and it should print that our character name is Bob onto the screen. So on play, if I hit load, you can see in the top left it says Bob. And if we open up our widget here, that is just because before we created the save game object reference, we set some variables inside of it, and then we saved it to our disk with the name of save1. And now when we came back later and we hit our load button, we told our game, hey, we think there is a save called save1 on our disk. Let's load that. It should be of the type tutorial save, and that you can see here it was. We set it as our reference, and now we can get the data out of it that we saved previously. And what was that data that we had like put in our framework for our tutorial save? Well, that was back inside of the tutorial save object. And you can see here we had created our previous variables. That's how this works, is that you create a save object, a save blueprint class. Inside of it, you say what is all the types of data that I want to save. I want to save my character, his XP, maybe his items or his inventory. That's all like the framework that we want to save. And then later, we can use that framework to create saves, to manipulate their data, and that later on we can then save it to a slot, and then later we can load it, and that we can then get all of that data back out of it. So it's fairly straightforward, it's fairly simple. It acts a lot like an actor, because it just houses variables. We can save its object reference or its actor reference. We can manipulate its variables inside of it, and we can retrieve out of it. It's a really simple system. Say we wanted to add on to this a little bit. Maybe we wanted our players to be able to have multiple save slots. So how I would probably do that is I would probably add a text box here. So if we added in inputs, we can add, is it called editable text now? Oh no, there it goes, text box. I believe that's what we want, and that this allows the user to enter text. Yep. So we can add a text box here, and that what we could do is we could call this like our save game name. And now what we can do is when the player hits save game, what we are going to do is I'm going to use that text box we just did, and I'm going to get the text out of it. How can we do that? Get, what is it? Yeah, just get text, there it is. And that we can convert that to a string, and now that will save its name to our character name. So now, or sorry, we don't want that there. Sorry, we don't want that being our character name. We want this to be the save slot name. Sorry, that was a little bit of a mistake. So now, when our player hits save game, whatever text they have typed into this text box, that will be the name of the save. However, there's going to be a little bit of an issue here, because if I do this and I go into our save and I can call this like, and I can call this Bob save, whatever it happens to be. That's really small, I apologize. And then when I hit save, that's going to name it on my hard drive of that save name. But there's an issue with that, because when we go back to load, we need to know what the save slot is that we're loading from. So a common way of fixing this issue, the nice solution to this, which I don't think exists unless you want to write C++ code, it would be nice if we had some type of tool that could just retrieve all of the available save games that we have on our hard drive. That doesn't exist. So a fix to this is that we can create another save game object, and that we can go into a new blueprint, a new save game, and now with this new save game, what we can do is we can call this like our meta save. This is very common to use some type of meta file, and inside of this meta file, I just want to simply store a variable, and I just want a simple variable of all of our save slots, and this is going to be a string, and I'm going to make this an array. So what this meta save is going to house is it's just going to house all of the names of our save games. So what happens is that later now, when our player goes to save the game, not only do I want to save it to our save game slot, but I want to save it to our meta game slot. So what we could do is we could do does a save exist, and what save exists, let's just call it meta, because this is going to be our meta save file. If our meta save file does exist, then we just want to load game from slot. That is going to be our meta save, and then inside of this meta save, we need to cast that to our meta save. And inside of this, what we just want to do is we want to get that save slots, and we just want to add to it. We want to add unique would be a good way of doing this. And inside of add unique, we just want to add the name of that save that we just did. However, if we don't currently have a meta slot, so this is like the first time a player has ever saved, we want to create a save game object. That save game object is going to be of our metasave class, and inside of this metasave class, we just want to do the same exact thing here. We just want to get out its save slots, add unique of the save name that the player just created, and then at the end of both of these, what we want to do is we just want to save this meta slot. So what we need to do is we just need to save game to slot. We are going to save of that metasave to the slot meta. We want to do the same thing down below, right here with this save game object. And now what we can do now is when our player saves, we are not only saving the save file data to a save, we are also saving the name of that save to a meta file. So that now what we could actually do is on construct of our game, when we pull up this save list, we could basically just create like a vertical box here. This is going to be sloppy, don't worry about my UI work. And inside of this, what I want to do is I'm going to add all of our save names. So to add all of our save names, I'm actually going to add another widget here just to get our slot, and this is just going to be our save slots. And inside of this widget, this is getting a little sloppy, I apologize. I'm just going to delete this canvas panel, and I just want to add a button. This button is going to have text inside of it. That text is going to be our save name, so I'm just going to call it our save name. Now on click of this button, we need to add our parent. This is getting a little sloppy. I apologize that this is getting a little complex. And this is going to be of our save widget. And that I need to make this the save widget class. So that now what we can do is on construct of our save widget, what we can do is we can, let's see here, we want to open up our meta widget, our meta save file. So what we can do is we can copy paste this code real quick right there. That works for me. So on construct of our widget, we're going to check, do we have a metasave file? If we do have a metasave file, I want to load it. And now what I want to do is I want to get all of our save slots. And for each of our save slots, what I want to do is I want to create a widget. And I'm going to create a widget of our save slots. And I'm going to add that to our vertical box. So I need to go back to my vertical box. I want to add that. I'm going to make it a variable. And we're going to call this our save slot holder. And with this, we can get it. We can add child to vertical box. The child that we're adding is that save slot. And now what happens is that we are going to add all of our save slots to this vertical box, but I need to do one more thing. I want to make a variable, and I'm going to call save name string. That works. I'm going to make it a string. I'm going to make it instance editable and expose on spawn. I apologize for how fast I'm working. I'm just trying to show how this functionality can be done very quickly. I apologize about that. And now if I go back to my save widget and I refresh this, under save slot, you can see we get our save name string. I'm just going to plug it into our array. And now what happens is that on the construction of our widget, we're going to see if we have a metasave game, and if we do, we're going to get out all of the save games that we have, and we are going to create a little save slot with a button for it, and then add that into our vertical box here so that we can visualize all of our saves. So let's try that out. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a few saves. So on play, I'm just going to create a few saves. I'm going to call this Bob save and save it. Wow, okay, that's not supposed to happen. Sorry about that. We'll fix that in a second. And then we'll call this like Steve save, and then we'll save it. So I just created 2 save files, and we added them to our meta widget. That's because that's on event tick. That's supposed to be on event construct. That was the issue there. So let's see. So now, if when we load, that should add those 2 widgets to our side. It's not naming them. I forgot to add their names, or I forgot to set their names. So on construct of our save slot, we want to take this save string, and we want to set the text of our save name text box, set text, and we're going to make it that save name. So now this should work, and then I'll walk through what we just did. So now on play, you can see we have our Bob save and we have our Steve save. So if I walk through everything that I just sped through, what happened was when our player hits that save button, what happens is that we're creating that save object, we're setting in the stats and all of that inside of it, and that we're saving it to our disk. But the save of that slot that we're saving to our disk, so on our disk, the name of that file is whatever the user had punched into that text box. Like I had named it like Steve save. Along with that, what we did is we used a meta save file or a meta save type and named it meta. And that what we did is we saved the names of these save files inside of an array. So that later on, when we constructed our widget, we got out all of those save slots. We loaded that meta file and we got out the save slots so that now we have a reference to all of our save games, so that no matter how many save games the players had, we now have a reference and we know the names of all of those save games, and that we can now add them to our viewport so that we can visualize them. And that if we add a little bit of more functionality, what we can actually do is that when the player clicks on one of these buttons, what we can do is we can communicate back to our save widget, and inside of our save widget we can make a function now. Is that we can make a custom event. We can call it like our load function. We can add in an input of a string, and we will call this our save name. And now instead of using our load button to load, what we can do is we can use this load function, and the slot that we're looking to load is just going to be the name that we're inputting from this function. And over inside of our save slot, with a reference to that save widget, we can call that save, what did I call it? Did I not call it save function? In the save widget, it's load function. Duh. Load function. And you can see it's taking that input that I created, and what is the name of our save? Well, we stored it here in this save name string. If you remember, when I created this this widget here, this save slot widget, I stored the name of its save from the save slot, and that we also use that to set the name inside of the button, so that later when the player clicks on that save slot to load it, when he clicks on that button, we can then call back to our save widget, and we can run the load function and load that specific slot name, and that you can see we will end up printing, I think it's Bob, to our screen. So we have our 2 saves. If I hit my Bob save, does it not run? Let's see. We're running into some type of issue there. Let's see here. When we hit save, load save, it's calling none, and we're getting none. Okay, so let's see here. It might be because there's actually a space inside of that save name. That could be an issue, so let's create a new one. I'm just going to call this this save, we're going to call it loads, no, that's too vague. Let's just call it yellow, just something random. I think there might have been an issue because I had a space inside of it. Let's try now. So now when we go here, there should be yellow, and when I click on it, no, it's not working. So why is that? So we're creating the save, right? We're saving it to slot. Let's see, it should be on our hard drive. We're checking our meta is working. We're definitely saving there. Let's see, and then when we try to load function of yellow, let's see, inside of our save slot, it should have been that one. We were doing it yellow. We're calling it. So let's see, are we ever calling that function? Here's a little bit of debugging. So when we hit yellow, no, we're not even calling that function. Aha, I forgot to store that variable. That's my bad. Okay, no, this is working properly. I forgot to store that variable. So outside of my save slot, I forgot to set the reference to our save widget. I'm just going to make that instance editable, expose on spawn. This is one of the sloppier tutorials I have done. I hope this is not too hard to follow. I just need to refresh this save slot here, save slot, and now we can get a reference to self, put that inside of our save widget. Now this should work just fine. So now if we hit Bob save, you can see we load it. So all in all, I tried to speed through this. I apologize if that was a little bit too much. But the key here is that to save, what we need is we need a saved object already existent. Whether we've loaded it or not, we need to either create it or load one to be able to save. If it's a first time save we want to create, we need to set its reference, we can store its variables, and that we end up saving. Later on, we can then load if we have the name of that save, and if you don't have the name of the save readily available, what you need to do is you probably need to do something like this, like the system here that I did, where we created a meta file. We store the names of our save slots inside of that meta file so that later we can load that meta file and we can get out its save slots and we can use that to load all of our saves. And you can see here how I used like an extra widget here to create and to store kind of that save name with a button so that we can click that save name, and that from this save, this little button widget here, we can call that load function, pass over the save name, load that save, and then now when we store it, now we can run around with our player and know who his character is, how much XP he has, stuff like that. So in all, I ended up making this a little bit more complex. I hope I wasn't too just everywhere in the complexity side of it, but really this is fairly simple. We really use three tools: creating a save game object, saving a save game object, and loading a save game object. That's really the three tools here, and that the only way we can do this is if we have a save game object already created, and that is here like our tutorial save. So that's how we use the save system, and that once you have this loaded, like I did here, once we have it loaded and we set it as a reference, we can get out any of our variables. We can get our XP, we could do whatever, and with this reference we can manipulate our objects. We can use it and we can set our XP and set it back into it, and that later we can go in and we can save it. So it's a really robust system, or it's actually like a really simple system that ends up kind of being robust because of how simple it is. So I hope that wasn't too much. I hope I wasn't everywhere. I was trying to explain kind of a more complete save system, and I kind of went probably a little too deep without explaining it, but hopefully that was simple enough for you guys. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.